Welcome. First of all, welcome. This is Unsolicited Perspectives. I'm your host, Bruce Anthony, here to lead the conversation in important events and topics that are shaping today's society. Join the conversation or follow us wherever you get your audio podcast. Subscribe to our YouTube channel for our video podcast and YouTube exclusive content. Rate, review, like, comment, share. Share with your friends, share with your family. Hell, even share with your enemies. On today's episode, I'll be interviewing Dr. Matt Salmon. He's a child, adolescent, and adult psychiatrist. He's also a manager of psychiatry at Whitman Walker Health. He's also an author of Pride and Prejudice, Healing Division in a Modern Family. We're going to be talking about his life, his work, his book. But that's enough of the intro. Let's get to the show. So as I say at the top, I'm here with Dr. Matt Salmon, not Salmon. Like I said earlier, Salmon. Like I said, he's a psychiatrist. He's an author. He's an advocate for the LGBTQ plus community. We're going to be talking about his life, his work, his book. Dr. Matt, it is my honor to get you on the show. We've been trying to do this for a little while, but we're here.
Yeah, I'm so grateful to be here. And honestly, my if we had connected when we initially did, we might be having a different conversation.
Oh, okay. That's interesting. Might want to have to go down that road towards the end. Let me make a little slight notation here, to maybe bring that up at the end of the interview. But I like to start off all interviews by going into the background. So tell me a little bit about your life and your upbringing.
Yeah, so I was born into a Mormon family. My father was a Republican congressman, actually. And so my life was um kind of under a microscope, it felt like a lot of the time. But as a queer autistic kid kind of growing up in this environment, it was pretty challenging to say the least, trying to grow up in as a queer kid in a highly religious setting uh that that really did not I guess agree, if you can agree, if you can agree or disagree with an identity.
Mm-hmm.
But um growing up that way and ultimately going through conversion therapy, which I did in my teens, um it it completely changed how I ended up seeing the world,
Mm-hmm.
and it ultimately led me to become the psychiatrist that I am today, and the advocate that I am today.
Okay, so let's go back because I definitely want to get into the conversion therapy, but let's go back further than that. You said your father was a Republican congressman from Utah. You grew up Mormon. Okay, so the first question that I have is, how did it feel to you growing up living in this structure? Because the Mormon religion is very, very conservative.
Hmm.
And you have a father who is a politician, who is very,
Yes.
very visible. How was that growing up for you internally? How did it feel inside knowing that you're going to church? You obviously look up to your father because he's your father,
Yeah.
but also realizing that what they're saying you should be is not how you feel inside.
Yeah. It was a complete, like, I mean, well, so being born into it, not knowing anything different, so I just assumed that was that that how I was an abomination. These are the messages I'm receiving. My own mother told me that, like, to be gay was disgusting. Like, these are the kinds of things that I would hear growing up. And so at the time, though, like, I'm just, you're a little kid just thinking that their parents can do no wrong,
Mhm.
and that, like, that your parents are everything. And so you believe everything they tell you, and you believe everything they tell you about yourself. You believe everything they tell you about the world, and it becomes like programmed into you, um, and how you see everyone else. And it was really hard because as I'm growing up and I'm thinking these things, like, they shouldn't, it shouldn't be this way. Like, I'm being told on one hand that, like, we should love everyone,
Right.
that all are God's children, regardless of their choices, regardless of the like, where their lives go, or like how they start, how they end, like, it doesn't matter. Like, that God's grace extends to all. And yet that wasn't what was practiced.
Mhm.
And ultimately I walked away from this, or I mean, as I grew up, I became kind of a shell, you know, living life like just in this shroud of shame and guilt, while thinking, like, that inside, like, I don't feel like this is wrong, but I'm being told it's wrong. And it was really hard to just kind of um hold those two things at the same time. And so, like, I just kind of kept my head down and I just pushed forward. I did everything, that I could to be as good as I could be. The best student, I did sports, and I I mean, I ultimately pursued degrees and all sorts of kind of education. And as I look back, like, I realize, like, I've made it my mission to, like, change the world, like, so that my family would be forced to change.
All right.
Um,
Okay.
yeah.
Because no matter what, they love you. So you give them the truest version of who you are. They have no choice but to accept it because they love you. And by doing that, they grow. Is that kind of, am I putting words in your mouth, or is that kind of what you're saying?
I mean, that's like the hope.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have an interesting story for me personally. Talking to two of one uncle, one aunt. One aunt is gay, my uncle heterosexual. And I remember talking to him about having a disagreement with a woman. And she was like, I'm not your type. Why am I not your type? And he says, I like what I like. And I've always held that true to who I am as a person. Hey, I don't have to explain it to you. I like what I like. And I go to my aunt who is gay. And I went to her one time, I had to be in my 20s. And I said, when did you know that you were gay, or that you liked what you liked? And she told me, well, I always knew. I knew as a little girl riding back from the beach, looking out the back of the station wagon and looking at the young girls. When was it a time for you that you said, hey, I like what I like, and this is who I am?
So I was 9 when I first realized, or like when I first, I guess, kind of understood that I was attracted to men, or that I liked men. And um I think I think at that time Um, it didn't feel like any kind of issue, but then the moment I started being bullied,
Mhm,
um, was when I realized that like that there was that people or that was when I started to experience messages that something was wrong with me.
mhm,
And so like that, and unfortunately that started when I was around 10 years old.
mhm,
Um that the kids at school just started to bully me and call me gay or faggot or queer, like those kinds of things. It's and how they I guess identified it in me before I didn't even have the words. I didn't even like I knew that I was attracted to like that handsome man playing with his kids or whatever, but like I didn't know what it meant
mhm,
until the bullies put words to it.
mhm. And being neurodivergent, which is, I just literally, ladies and gentlemen, just heard this interview with Mr. Thomas Wilson, who talked about neurodivergence. Being neurodivergent, it's tough to kind of find your lane that makes you comfortable, to find your safe space. And on top of that, you're coming into your own, when you're starting to identify what your sexuality is from outside forces telling you this is what you are and putting a negative connotation from it. What is that like growing up, not only being neurodivergent, right? That makes you different from everybody else or different from the collective. And we're finding out that there's a spectrum on this and we're not all so different, but depending on when you grew up, it would make you extremely different from everybody else, or what things are being geared towards you as far as advertisements and things of that nature. And then also this realization that you're being bullied and, oh, yes, I am gay. They're pointing it out to me. This isn't just, I think the father across the street playing with his kids is handsome. I'm attracted to him. It's, it's more than just thinking that he's handsome. What is that like growing up in this environment where maybe you don't have a safe space?
I mean, when I put those pieces together,
Mhm,
I was terrified.
mhm,
And I ultimate and then from that moment that I realized it through the rest of my adolescence, I just lived in fear.
mhm,
I I worried about like how I moved my body. I worried about how my voice sounded, even like how I wrote things because if like because I have pretty good handwriting and I would be told that I wrote like a girl. And
I'm sorry, but how can you write like a girl? I don't even know what that means.
because it was like pretty.
I wish I had pretty handwriting. Let me please write like a quote
I know.
unquote girl, but go ahead. I just don't
Dude,
understand how that's a knock, but
like
okay.
it was everything. I know as a little kid, like I was being told I couldn't move that way or wear that thing or do this or that. And everything would make me a bigger target.
Mm,
And on top of that, like I was getting those messages at home too. If I put
right.
something on, like, and would walk out of my room and my mom would tell me that I couldn't wear what I was wearing because of how it would make me look. And so I, I just felt so constricted. Um, and I just, yeah, it was really terrifying. Like, I just felt like I was in hell, basically.
Cool. What is your social in elementary school, middle school? We'll get to high school, but at elementary and middle school, as you're going through this, and as you said, you're being bullied. did you have a social group? Did you have friends that you were just like, they're your buddies and that you did feel safe at? Because from what you're describing to me, you didn't feel really too safe at school. You didn't really feel too safe at home. Where was your safe space? Where was that place where you didn't live in fear?
So, um, I ultimately ended up I I ultimately made friends with a lot of, like, girls,
Mhm.
um, and, because like, the girls were really kind. They were just compassionate and soft, and they, like, they treated me nice, and so I associated only with them, and unfortunately, that put a bigger target on me because that made the boys like, really, like, drive home their whole gay agenda, and, bullying me for only being friends with girls, but the girls were so kind to me, and so, like, I had a few, like, real girl best friends
Mhm.
that just took me under their wing, and they just were really sweet, and it was, like, there that I found my solace.
Okay. That was your safe space. That's dope. When was the time that you said earlier that it was the bullying that made you realize that you were queer? When was it that it really clicked in your head for you and you accepted it, even though you were raised in this Mormon conservative household that said that it was the worst thing in the world that you could be, which, by the way, I don't know how being a part of the LGBTQ plus community can be worse than being a murderer, but okay. When was that time for you? What age? And how did you come out to your parents?
So, um, it was I think the 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 time that really stands out to me, I was 14, and this was the time that when I told when I officially told my mom. It was, like, Christmas night, and she came in to say goodnight, and I had been planning it. I had, like, thought about, like, what I was gonna say, like, rehearsed in my head, like, thinking about just the right words, and I sat her down, and it was, like, something kind of, very dramatic. It was like, "Mom, you should sit down for this."
Mhm.
Um, and, uh, and I said, "I'm attracted to guys." And I paused, like, I was expecting just some kind of just shame or disgust or what have you, and she just said, "Man, lots of people are curious about these kinds of things, like, it's, uh it's probably a phase. You'll grow out of it." And it had like I said, I was 9 when I first, was kind of attracted to men, and so this it's 5 years now. I'm like,
Mhm.
this so in my 14-year-old brain, I'm like, 5 like, it's not a phase, like, it's
Right.
5 years. But I just I guess, just didn't push back more, and my mom never said anything about it, and didn't tell my dad, like, it was as if it never happened. Um,
Why did you tell your mom over your dad? Because just from this conversation that we've had, it seemed that it was your mom that had said, you know, being gay is horrible. And I haven't really heard anything from your father. Not saying that he wasn't saying these things. I haven't. The thing that you identified first with was your mom. So I'm just
Yeah.
wondering, like, why mom instead of dad? Or had dad said things and we just haven't approached that yet in this conversation?
Well, so a big part of that was because because my dad joined Congress when I was, I think, three or six. It was somewhere in like 3 to 5 area,
Mm.
and so like he was gone most of the time. Like was pretty much raised by my mom only because he was in DC most of the week. He would travel on Monday and then come back on Friday, and pretty much did that every week. And so we only saw him on weekends.
And you guys are
Um,
located, I thought you were located here in DC while he was a congressman. He's commuting back and forth from your home state, which is
Arizona.
Arizona.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So yeah, he's a weekend father.
Yes, he was a weekend father. And so I didn't really like think of him as a parent. And so my mom was my go-to. And so she was the one that I told. But what was interesting was that it was in my teens, as I'm coming of age and like understanding this about myself, that I started to grow closer to my dad. Because about a year later, after I told my mom, my dad came to like check in with me. It's custom in Mormon families for fathers to check in with, like, have routine kind of check-ins with their adolescent children, kind of as they're coming of age, to as being the patriarch to kind of help guide them and counsel them. And so he was checking in with me, asking questions, started exploring like sexuality, or start like checking in, wanting to make sure about like porn. He wanted
Mm.
checking porn safety. And his questioning, he just like asked the right questions, and me, and as an autistic kid who just couldn't lie, I just told him the truth about what I saw, what I looked at on the internet, because I had already started looking at porn.
Mhm.
And so in that, he like ultimately came to understand that I was gay, and he offered me something which, to me at the time, it was a, like, almost like a relief. But what he said was, it's there's nothing wrong with you having these attractions, these thoughts, like these desires. Um, it's only wrong if you act on them.
Mm.
So
So
basically, like,
he was preaching suppression.
yes.
Okay.
But I had believed that I was going to go to hell just because I was feeling this way.
Hmm.
Um, and so that was a relief to me. And it kind of like gave me hope for the next several years. If I can just as long as I don't do anything, as long as I don't act on it. So I like dated girls, and I ultimately kind of pursued all sorts of just relationships and things like that. And dad saw me as a ladies man, and so I, yeah, I was proud, or he was proud of me, and so we bonded. it worked out that way.
So this was through high school. You brought up earlier that you went through conversion therapy. At what time frame was this happening?
Yeah. So, mm, um, like I said, it was okay unless I acted on it.
Right.
By the end of high school, I couldn't suppress it anymore. And I acted on it.
Mhm.
And like I had a fling with a guy, and it was some, like, honestly, for the first time, like, after, like, dating girls and, like, all that, everything, nothing that all this stuff that just felt so forced and unnatural, like, to be with a guy for the first time, it just felt so natural and right. And yet, like, all of my programming was telling me that it was wrong. And so I confessed it.
Mm. You confessed it because you just felt, I don't even want to say you felt ashamed about it, or did you feel ashamed about acting on it based on the way you were raised and what your parents believe?
I felt tons of shame.
Mm.
Yeah.
So
Um,
when you confess it, what happens next?
so yeah, so I confessed it, and the reason I, like, a big part of that was me trying to, like, thinking, confession and I'll be forgiven, and then I can go and be a Mormon missionary, which is what Mormon boys are supposed to do. But when I confessed it, the the leader I confessed it to told my parents. And then it was at that point, that was when they decided I needed conversion therapy.
Okay. I have two questions. You confessed it to a leader in your church, and the church leader told your parents?
Yes.
And I'm not familiar with the Mormon faith. There's no, like, what I confess to you, you, like, in Catholicism, you confess to a priest. The priest, that's between you and the priest. There is nothing like that in the Mormon faith.
I thought there was.
Okay, so it
I
broke
was 18.
protocol.
I was even
Okay,
18.
okay, okay. So you were, I'm not going to say betrayed by the church, betrayed by this person
Well,
by telling
I
your
was
parents.
betrayed by the church. We can say that.
Okay, okay. You were
They did
betrayed,
me wrong, for sure.
and we're going to get into that because I'm curious about that. But okay, so you confess to the leader tells your parents. You start conversion therapy. Can you tell my audience exactly what that is before describing what you went through?
Yeah, so conversion therapy is a term for, there are other terms for it as well, and actually reparative therapy was what my therapist called it. Um, Repairing the broken bonds of masculinity or whatever. But anyway, all of these are pseudo or junk science that is pushed out by kind of ecclesiastic um, institutions that claim they have some kind of understanding of human psychology. And these are efforts to kind of force people to change from gay or trans or like any kind of LGBTQ identity to fit into mainstream heteronormativity. And so, like, in historically, there have been really almost even like a very abusive efforts. They used to do electric shocks, and they used to do, like, give people ipecac, which would make them, like, they would show them pornographic images, give them ibuprofen, which would cause them to like violently vomit. And so people would associate vomiting and being disgusted with these kinds of images. Or like even in some there were like people being castrated or even being lobotomized. Like these are kind of treatments that they were prescribing. And unfortunately, the American Psychiatric Association like gave the full stamp of approval back in the day because they were the ones that first classified homosexuality as a mental illness.
Say back in the day, can you give a time frame exactly when that is?
I think it started, I think it was first in the 50s, maybe when they first pushed out when they first decided that homosexuality was a mental illness. Um and uh and then they kind of had different iterations as they developed, and it wasn't until like 87 that they officially removed homosexuality as a mental disorder. Um I mean, they still consider like transgender identities as mental illness in the DSM today. There's also still super corrupt, but I digress. And again, this is coming from a psychiatrist. Um, and yeah, so with all of this, it, I mean, like the type that I went through, luckily, I, well, I mean, I guess if I can say luckily, I don't know. I wasn't like lobotomized. I wasn't like shocked, but it was psychological torture because, and that's what and I say torture, I don't say that just to be inflammatory, but because like it's psychological torture because you are ultimately brainwashing someone to believe they are something that they are not.
Right.
And you are and they're trying to scrub away someone's identity and take away one of the most core pieces of what makes us, which is like how that part of us that is the pull to connect us to other people. And so ultimately that's what they're doing in these therapies is they're employing psychological tactics, gaslighting and invalidation, and they do it in these ways that seems like it's therapeutic, and it like is cushioned with like love and like all about like empowerment. We're empowering you to be the man you were always meant to be. Like you just didn't have a healthy like male role model to identify with, and so you turned what was exotic, erotic is what they literally said. And my therapist has literally written books about how homosexuality is like he compares it to like a sexual cannibalism. Like yeah, you have to go feed off of eat off like masculine energy in order to like fill this like void of masculine energy that you don't have. And it's yeah.
Okay. That's interesting and different. I didn't even know that there was a thing that was masculine energy. You could just touch it like what? I don't know. You can absorb it like Michael, like Prince's aura or something like that. Like you just can
Mhm.
suck in masculinity or femininity, right? There's just an aura that
Yep.
oozes out. Okay, so you go through the conversion therapy. You go through this torture. You come out of it. You are in college at this point, correct? Because you're 18.
Yeah.
What happened next? And then What is the process from transitioning to that to doing what you do now?
Yeah, so ultimately, I actually decided after years of praying and asking God to change me, I was like, after going through all of this, I knelt down, and actually I was dating a girl at the time, and this girl she was great. She was she was the one that like taught me how to kiss, or I feel like she really helped me become the better kisser that I am today. And I would get aroused when I was like making out with her. So I was like, okay, if I have to marry a woman, like maybe this one.
Right.
But like how sad for her, like if I have to marry a woman, um, like
I wasn't going to comment on that comment that you just said. I was just going to let that slide. But since you
yeah,
brought it up, that's crazy. Yeah. If I
right?
got to marry a woman, you would be the one that I choose. You all right. You all right for a woman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like thank God for her, she came to me and she sits me down and she was also Mormon. And she starts crying and she's like, "Matt, I'm so sorry, but I was praying and the Holy Spirit told me that we have to break up. I don't know why, and it's not what I want, but I have to listen to it." And I'm like, "Damn." Like like okay, like if there ever was a sign,
Right.
like I
Yeah.
think this is it. And so I was like, God, like, okay, if you're going to cock block the one straight relationship that I thought I could be in, then you must like not you must have planned like be fine with me being gay. And so I prayed and I was like, God, I'm done asking for you to change me. I'm gay and I'm okay with that. And you know what? If you have a problem with it, you better let me know. But you have to tell me directly. Otherwise, like, I'm done.
And how
And
old were you when this happened?
I was I was 20. No,
So
wait.
from
Yeah, I was 20. Yeah.
so from the age of 9 to 20, it took 11 years. It took 11 years for you to finally, hmm, how can I put this delicately? Accept you for being you.
Yeah.
Okay. So you finally accept you for being you. God, I'm taking, does not send you a sign directly saying, don't be you. He's saying, be you.
Yeah.
What's next?
So, yeah, so from there, I decided to make it my mission. Um so that my I made it my mission so that nobody would ever have to go through something like I did again. And so I from there started to become like politically active. Obviously not in like with the political values that I was brought up with.
Right.
Um well, I initially tried to do it from within. I actually went and um uh like formed the Log Cabin Republican chapter in Arizona.
Okay.
Um and I was like, all right, I'm gonna try and do it from the inside, and it was very discouraging because like what was I think what was so discouraging was not that these politicians like believed any or believed harmful things. They actually all were very in support of LGBTQ rights, but none of them would do anything about it. because they wouldn't get voted or they wouldn't get elected.
Right.
All of them would tell me behind closed doors, like, yeah, like, we support you. Even the executive, like, Republican office in Arizona, like the executive leadership of the Republican Party in Arizona would say, like, yeah, we support you. But, like, that's not going to get us votes.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so I, after hearing all of this over and over again, I just threw my hands up and completely left that. And that was when I ended up ended up in medical school after that. And so I kind of just threw my focus from there into my studies and into becoming a psychiatrist and mental health provider who could then support and help people recover from environments like I grew up in.
Okay. And what was the catalyst? What was that wheel that turned in your head, and because for that said, this is exactly what I want to do? Because it kind of seemed like there was already a spark when you initially set out to make sure that anybody who was a part of the LGBTQ plus community, I loved, this is my favorite word, had a safe space to be themselves. So you already had that spark. You're in medical school and you just, what is that thing? Was there a moment that you're just, I don't know, taking a walk, or you're in a library, you're studying, you're like, no, this is it. No, this is exactly what I want to do.
Um, well, so a big moment for me, my dad ended up, he had like retired from Congress in my teens, but then he went back. And he served another 2 terms. And this was while I was in medical school. And he was interviewed. So by this time I was out. And so it was known that, this Republican congressman has a gay son. And so he was interviewed on live TV and asked, like, having a gay son, does that change your stance on gay marriage? And he said no. And and so what that ultimately did was it inspired me because I decided I am going to be the bigger person here. Um and and so I decided I was going to support my family in their really shitty politics, despite the fact of like cost it had on me. And while I couldn't condone their beliefs, like what I I ultimately, supported their their right to believe as they did. And so I went on live TV and talked about how, like, yeah, absolutely, I wish that they would be different, but you know, as a politician, his he owes his opinions to the his constituency. And so, like, he has to do what the people that put him in power say he has to do. And I think from there, when I did that, my family kind of saw it as like an olive branch, and it actually planted a seed for them, and it started to change. And after I did my live interview, my dad took me aside, and he told me, he was like, you know what? After your interview, I was really thinking about it, and I've changed. Like, I do want marriage for you. Like, I want you to be able to get married. unfortunately, like it was still something that he wasn't willing to like publicly say because of how it would affect his reputation, but that was what was coming from, or that was what I was getting at home. And so to me, like that kind of lit a spark in me that, if kind of by extending grace and offering that to them, we were able to build this bridge and start to grow together.
And through that, you realized, yeah, I want to get into psychiatry and I want to help the kids that were just like me.
Yeah, and so it was, well, so I would say a lot of like the conversion therapy and my experience with that is what kind of really gave me the passion more so for psychiatry and working with kids. But then it was like with the experience with my family with that and how I could see ways to build bridges with families, it became more about like helping families who, like mine, may have like a queer kid and conflicting beliefs, and working to help them kind of integrate together in a way that like they could create that safe space in their homes.
So what you're describing to me is your book, right? Like the book
Yes.
that has recently just been published, Pride and Prejudice, Healing Division in the Modern Family. I wanted to get into the actual work with the kids, but I feel like these two things kind of work with each other. And I was going to ask you, what does equitable, identity affirming, and holistic care look like when working with the young adolescents in the LGBTQ plus community? And
Hmm.
then taking that, I'm sure working with these children, you're helping them heal their family. And is that what sparked you to write this book?
Yeah, so like kind of see like the like seeing the my family grow and like and that kind of healing that healing journey that we went on together is what really inspired me to try to offer that for others. Um, and so it's, yeah, so I pretty much kind of put my entire like life and and work and education and everything into that, which is kind of an exploration of the way that systems, including, from family to community, like, and religion and how, and then also how, like, just government and everything can impact the health of marginalized people. Um, the main focus, of course, is like queer identity, but of course, weaving in neurodivergence and then trying to speak to, not from, of course, personal experience, but like to other types of marginalized experiences that also are impacted by social fact, like whose health is also significantly impacted by social factors.
When you say health, you're not solely talking about emotional and mental. Are you also talking about physical as well?
Yeah. So there's a lot of research that in the last maybe decade or so, maybe 2 decades, has really like shed light on the fact that our physical health actually is up to 55% derived from social factors.
Mm.
So like what we now know is almost most of our health is controlled by the factors in which we like live and engage every day. So that could be like the neighborhood you grew up in. That could be your level of education. That could be your like socioeconomic status. That could be if you experience discrimination of any kind. And so like what we know is that like our society is harming people significantly. And 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 so like I mean I think those that live it probably could could have already told you, but like we now actually have all the science to say that yes, this is true. And so that's given me another like kind of a new passion for just completely wanting to dismantle the system and do everything I can to make sure that we can not just like change, you know, like life for individuals, but just as society at large, because in order to really in order to get to a place for of true equitable health in America, we have to we have to create a new system. We can't. There's no way we can with the one we have.
So I find that very interesting. And I love talking about this. We always say the LGBTQ plus community. I think I said all of them right. Um, but this community is not a monolith, right?
Hmm.
Each letter or identifier has their own social justice efforts.
Yeah.
How can we make sure that everybody that's in the LGBTQ plus community, this large community that no matter which one you are part of, you've been thrown into this big melting pot and said you are all the same when you're not. How can you make sure that all of the social efforts are being addressed for each individual community in this large grouping of communities?
Well, I think um I think it when we just decide that every life has value, regardless of the like dollar sign that or like how much it contributes to this like capitalist regime that we have, or I guess not even capitalist regime, we're now a plutocratic oligarchy.
Yep.
um so like but I think if we all just decide that everyone has value, um whether or not they are um like putting money into the economy, um, that's really all it takes. It's not that
Yeah.
hard. It's really wild to me. Um, I mean, I guess like I don't know. I guess it's so wild to me how just coming from like a religion, cult, whatever, where I was taught that like I should love everyone, defend the marginalized, like feed everyone, care for everyone. But then when I like try to put it into practice, I'm called like a commie or like a socialist, like as if it's like a bad thing. Like it's so it just I just don't understand. Like somebody please explain it to me
I
because
think I think that is the question that everybody is trying to get to. Please help me understand how we're taught one thing, we put it in practice, but when we put it in practice, we're told that we're doing it wrong. I don't get it either. I don't get it either. But back to your book and back to working with young people that are part of the LGBTQ plus community and mending what could possibly be friction in the family.
Mhm.
What are some of the things that you write about in the book? Just a summary, because we want people to buy your book. Just a
Yeah.
summary of things that people can do to help foster a healthy family dynamic
Yes. Okay. So, like for if parents can just see their children as independent, autonomous beings that they need to like foster and like nurture in a way that helps them be like thrive into the individual that they are meant to become, rather than seeing them as an extension, of themselves that they just have to like that has to like conform to every expectation that they have. Like, don't colonize your children. Like, let them just be who they're going to be, and nurture them. It's the same thing that I believe our society should do, or what I think we should do with education, which is individualized, strengths based assessments of each child. Like, so parents should not treat all of their children the same. Treat each
No.
child as a different child. And each child needs to be assessed for their strengths, assessed for their areas for growth, help them grow in the ways that they need to, harness their strengths. And like, it's really not that difficult. And don't see like, no child is no child is trying to be bad. Like, that's just not a child in a child. That's not in a child. And if a child is trying to be bad, that's because you made them that way. Like, as a parent, you did that. That's not a default setting for children. And so if they are bad, it's on you. And
Right.
so, like, if you can give your children what's called unconditional positive regard. Carl Rogers is the one who coined that. And that is, give them the benefit of the doubt. Treat your children as if they're not manipulative little monsters, but actually just little things that are just going about the world, bumping into things, making mistakes, and just trying to figure out how to engage in the world. And they just need somebody who's kind to just be like, oh, not like that. Oh, let's try this way. Instead of just being completely demonized and criticized and like, and being told that they're bad because just when they tried to do something in a way that nobody ever showed them how to do it anyway. Like, it's not like
Sure.
you didn't model for them how to actually behave properly, did you, in the first place? So if you didn't model for them how to behave properly, it's not their fault that they didn't do it.
Right. Yeah. Well, Dr. Matt, this has been highly informative. I know my audience has learned not only a lot about you, but for my parents out there, some things that they can improve upon uh, for their children, and for the people that are young adolescents listening to this that are part of the LGBTQ plus community. You are not alone. Dr. Matt is here to help. Read his book. Do you have any parting words to say to the audience before we end this conversation?
So I guess the only parting words I would say is, like, if all else fails, just love. Like, lean into love. That is what we should have be our default setting.
That's, I wish I could end it on that. I've got to say thank you for coming on, but that was perfect. Love is all you need. That's what they said. At least that's what I think the Beatles said. Dr. Matt, I really appreciate you coming on the show and enlightening not only me, but also my audience. This has been a wonderful interview, and I really appreciate you coming on.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, Bruce.
It was my pleasure. I want to thank Dr. Matt once again for coming on and sharing his story with us and sharing some of his work. Don't forget his book, Pride and Prejudice, Healing Division in a Modern Family. All of his information will be down in the description section here on the audio and video podcast. If you go on our website, he has a specific guest profile section where you can get all of his work. So just go to unsolicitedperspectives.com to find out what he's doing and find out how to get a hold of his book. Look, I love his parting words is to love. Y'all know I'm kind of sappy. I love people. Not all of y'all. Some of y'all are kind of dumb and I don't really want to be associated with you, but I still love you. I don't have to like you, but I still love you. And I accept you for who you are. And isn't that what we all should be doing? Accepting people for who they are and just respecting that. If you're a parent and your kid has come out to you, or your kid has not come out to you, but you have some idea, and parents do. Parents are not oblivious, unless you just don't pay attention to your kid, right? Parents are not oblivious. Accept them for being who they are. They are not going to be carbon copies of you. They're not going to be many of you. They may look like you, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be who you want them to be. Help them grow, like Dr. Matt said, to be the best person that they can be. That's your job. That's your job, to help them be the best person that they can be. Not what they could be in your eyes, what the best person they could be in their own eyes. And you do that with love. So I love Dr. Matt for saying that. And also remember that people just want to feel safe. And isn't it the most important that children feel safe? Don't you want to give them those safe spaces to be who they are? Making mistakes is kind of a part of growing up. As Dr. Matt said, instead of punishing, yelling, screaming, teach them. If they make a mistake, teach them. Help them grow as a person with love. It might sound sappy, but it's also very real. I can't get no realer than that. I really can't. And Dr. Matt gave it to y'all raw, real, and I loved it. Very, very interesting story. And everything that he went through to get to where he is today. Very, very inspiring. So once again, I want to thank Dr. Matt for coming on the show. I want to thank you for listening. I want to thank you for watching. And until next time, as always, I'll holla. Whew, that was a hell of a show. Thank you for rocking with us here on Unsolicited Perspectives with Bruce Anthony. Now, before you go, don't forget to follow, subscribe, like, comment, and share our podcast wherever you're listening or watching it to it. Pass it along to your friends. If you enjoy it, that means the people that you rock will enjoy it also. So share the wealth, share the knowledge, share the noise. And for all those people that say, well, I don't have a YouTube. If you have a Gmail account, you have a YouTube. Subscribe to our YouTube channel where you can actually watch our video podcast. But the real party is on our Patreon page, After Hours Uncensored and Talking Straight-ish. After Hours Uncensored is another show with my sister. And once again, the key word there is uncensored. Those are exclusively on our Patreon page. Jump onto our website at unsolicitedperspectives.com for all things us. That's where you can get all of our audio, video, our blogs, and even buy our merch. And if you're really feeling generous and want to help us out, you can donate on our donations page. Donations go strictly to improving our software and hardware so we can keep giving you guys good content that you can clearly listen to and that you can clearly see. So any donation would be appreciative. Most importantly, I want to say thank you, thank you, thank you for listening and watching and supporting us. And I'll catch you next time. Audi 5000. Peace. Freedom over fame.